Hey, New Life. So we're quickly approaching the Easter season, and in preparation for that season, let's take a look at the story of Easter. Now, I know that Easter for we as believers is the foundation of our faith. Jesus walked out of the tomb, he rose. And too often we tend to look at Easter through the lens of what does this mean for me? What has God done for me? But I want to challenge you with something. What if this season leading up to Easter, we began to look at Jesus as a model for how we should live in our current world? You see, if he is raised from the dead and we believe that in the very core of our being, then we need to do everything we can to model him, his teachings, his message in our world. In other words, instead of this Easter focusing upon ourselves, let's see what it means by us looking outward in light of the resurrection. I want to talk today about a few verses that we find in Luke chapter 19. Jesus is coming into Jerusalem on his triumphal entry. And as he's coming down the Mount of Olives, overlooking the city of Jerusalem, he would have seen the temple and its beautiful courtyards and its ornamentation. People would be streaming into the city from all over the known world at that time, getting ready to celebrate the Passover. And in this moment of joy and exuberation and anticipation, Jesus weeps. Let's look at these verses. We're in Luke chapter 19, verses 41 and following. And when he drew near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, "Would that even today you knew the things that make for peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes." He goes on to talk about the coming destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. I want to focus on, would even today you knew the things that make for peace, but they are hidden from your eyes. When we look at our world, are we moved to tears? See, Jesus, when he looked over Jerusalem, it broke his heart because he knew what their choices and their behaviors were leading to. It was leading to their destruction. And he wept. But what was it that was causing him to weep? Not just their destruction, but that they had not recognized the things that make for peace. Within Jesus's contemporary Judaism, the things that make for peace are things that make for peace between Israel and God. But how do they do that? By how they treat others. When he mentions, "but they are hidden from your eyes," this refers back to a passage in the book of Proverbs, which talks about the person who is stingy versus the one who is charitable. In other words, Jesus is saying, because you hated one another and you were not charitable and generous, ultimately destruction is going to come upon you. Interestingly enough, after that event takes place in the year AD 70, the Jewish sages are going to say that the reason why the temple was destroyed was because they hated their brother and they loved money. We live in a day and age where we are more concerned about being right in our cause than loving our neighbor. When Jesus looked at his world, he didn't find fracture lines and try and increase those fracture lines. When Jesus looked at his world, he didn't sit here in judgment condemning them. He didn't isolate himself from the world in which he lived in. Rather, he brought his message of loving your enemy, of caring for those who are in need. And he recognized that in that message was Israel's hope of redemption. And when he saw them turning their back on his message, it broke his heart. Too often as believers, we get caught up in picking the right side or arguing our case. But that's not what we're called to do. We're called to love. We're called to be merciful as our Father in heaven is merciful. We're called to care for those in need. When we look at our world today, do we find our heart broken? Or do we draw up our battle lines, looking to lob our verbal missiles across at those people on the other side that don't agree with us? If we're going to be like Jesus, if we're going to live our lives in light of his resurrection, then the things that broke his heart need to break ours. The things that he taught us, commanded us, need to be our marching orders in terms of how we live. As we prepare this year to celebrate the Lord's resurrection, let us do so by more firmly committing to obeying his message and living it out every day in our places of work, in the marketplace, in our families, even among the strangers among us. Have a great day, everyone.